the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Pia Beck is the founder of Curate Well Co, a business consultancy and marketing agency, and considered a curbside coffee shop. On the Curate side, she helps entrepreneurs, small businesses, and startups change narratives and redefine norms in industries that are desperately calling for something different. On the considered side, she leads a team in making great coffee, providing an unparalleled customer experience, and setting a new standard in the service industry. These days, not much is predictable for Pia, and she's supported by two outstanding teams. When she's not working, you can find her at the beach, walking with her dog King, or soaking up slow mornings in front of the fireplace. Pia and her team have been part of my extended team since last year, and they have been instrumental in helping to launch the Girls Club Collective, update my brand messaging, and put community at the center of my business. In this episode, Pia and I chatted about everything from how she has taken a full stack approach to business through Curate Well Co to how she's translated that to curbside coffee with Considered. We also talked about what it was like for Pia to receive an OCD diagnosis at 28 and a whole bunch of other things. It was such a privilege to get to have this conversation with Pia, and I know you're going to enjoy getting to know her as much as I have. Hello, and welcome to another new episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. I am so excited to have Pia back here today. She is the founder and CEO of Curate Well Co. And also, Pia, I'm guessing official title too is founder and CEO of Considered Coffee.
Yes, as of late.
As of late. Amazing. Well, we'll get into that as well. But yeah, Pia, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Liz. I can't wait.
This is like so fun. As context, I first met Pia. I was actually like really impressed by her introduction post in Dreamers and Doers. It was like beautiful and like comprehensive. And I think, Pia, you're like one of the first people, I know I've told you this a couple times, but like you're one of the only people I can think of in recent history where like I went to your website and I read every word on every page. It's like, this is so good. It is like so deeply speaking to a need. And at the time, I remember like looking at like all the different options for working with Curate Well Co. And I was like, I can't even imagine like how like my business could support this, but I really want it to happen. And have gotten, and it happened. I made it happen.
It happened.
And we've gotten to partner on a few different things over the past, almost year now. And so fun to get to bring on the podcast and introduce you to the people in my world.
I'm honored to be here.
Yay. Well, now gushing, I won't say complete, but I feel like there's probably more to come. Would you mind briefly introducing yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Pia, and I am the founder of Curate Well Co, which is a business consultancy and marketing agency. That was my first business. I started it about 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more at this point, and totally like bootstrapped and winged the whole thing. I like quit my job pretty much on a whim, and a very strong conviction whim, but still short notice. I didn't have any financial runway or plan or anything, and kind of just grew it brick by brick. And now we have a team of probably about 15 people on the Curate side, which is really cool. We get to serve entrepreneurs and small businesses and startups that are really looking to do something different in their space. And so the way it's always been done clearly isn't working in some way, shape, or form. And we get to work with the people who are, in my opinion, brave enough to be willing to admit that, and also dedicated enough to the collective good to be willing to change it. And that is so fulfilling and incredible. And we get to support a lot of really important work that's being done in a lot of different industries. And then recently, my team and I launched Considered, which is a sister company of Curate Well Co in a totally different space. It's a coffee shop, a mobile coffee shop, actually, in a 1965 VW bus. So that's here in Santa Barbara, where myself and my leadership team are based. And we've been up and running for about a month now. And that's been a whole other adventure. I was telling you just before we started recording that it was pouring down rain this morning. So that's a whole thing. That's been super fun and totally different business model. A lot of crossover, which is really cool. Like there were some parts of that we were like so prepared for and did really well and are like totally strengths of ours compared to some of the other coffee shops in town. And then there's like this whole other set of activities that I knew nothing about, still know nothing about, and like kind of just cross my fingers that like work out okay sometimes. So it's been really cool to get to build a business in like a totally different way.
Ah, that's so fun. Well, I definitely want to talk about like both like arms or sisters within the overall umbrella. Would love if you wouldn't mind telling us like a little bit more about. I love how you just described Curate Well Co and sort of like the heart behind the brand. But would love to hear a little bit more about like the role that you play in like the broader entrepreneurial ecosystem and more about who you work with and how.
Yeah, for sure. So we are not the people who are going to help you like create a course with a really complex funnel that's totally automated that you launch over and over again and earn passive income from. We're very open to different formats of offerings. We work with some product based businesses, we work with a lot of service based businesses, and there's varying degrees of involvement that come with the offers that we help our clients build. But we are really the people who are going to help create an experience that both like you as the founder and the leader of your business and the people who are consuming your product are involved in the right ways. So we're not against automation, right? If it makes your life a little bit easier. And I'm definitely of the belief that we're never going to be able to replace like the human experience. And so we don't really work with people who identify as like online business owners, although we have an online presence and most of our clients do as well. We're really working with the people who um, are interested in taking a pretty grassroots approach to building their movement. And so what that looks like is really calling people in. And so it's not really like marketing tactics, although of course marketing strategy is a big part of what we do. It's more about how do we have people raise their hand and say, I am excited to opt into this. Like, this is something I want to be a part of. So that experience that you described, thank you, by the way, for all the compliments about our copy and our website. That's like very intentional, right? And that's what we help other people do is we want it to really resonate. We want to make it relatable. We want to make it irresistible, but not in that like shiny, like sexy way, but more so in that like, oh wow, like this is speaking to my values and my beliefs and my worldview, and these are my people, and they're doing something that I believe in. And so that's what we help a lot of the people that we work with do. And then that comes in all shapes and forms.
Totally. I mean, I think like the line, if I'm going to like quote something I believe is on your website and all over your marketing that like just really struck me is like your industry is calling for something different. Like we think you're it.
Yeah, it's pretty much every industry, unfortunately, in like the world that we live in these days is not doing things awesomely. So it doesn't matter kind of like what space you're in. But I think that we've really come up on a time where there's like this revolution happening, right? Where everyone's just kind of like done. Like, I'm done.
Mhm.
I'm just like, I don't have the time, energy, attention, desire, interest in things that aren't um thoughtful or exceptional or aligned with what I really care about or whatever that is. And that's across like all areas of our lives. And I think that that definitely applies to like the things that we spend our money on, and the products we consume and the services that we consume. And so we are really looking to work with the people who are like, oh, yeah, like, I don't really want to do it this way. Who said who said to do it this way in the first place? And like, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to my people. It's kind of just like not intuitive, not interesting, not exciting, and not like what I would choose to do if there wasn't this like weird precedent that this is like quote unquote the way it should be done. Um, and so we take a lot of principles that applied to that approach and keep the rules we like and also just like throw out the rules that we don't like and recreate things that kind of sort of already exist but not really.
Absolutely, which is so cool. And I do think that like this idea too of like helping kind of be someone's co-founder, helping them think through stuff, especially for people who like maybe initially started their businesses as solopreneurs or like freelancers. I know it was true for me. Like, when I got started, it was just sort of like, how can I find like clients and projects and stuff to work on to like support myself, but like pretty quickly I was like, "Oh no, I'm running a business." And it's just
Yeah,
I was talking to someone yesterday who is at the very early stage of entrepreneurship and consulting, and she actually reflected. She's like, "It's in I hadn't really thought about this as like I have a business." And it's just a huge mindset shift, but it also like
totally.
is can be so lonely to try to figure that out when like you got into doing this because you love what you do and not necessarily because you were like looking to build a business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really common. We hear this all the time of like, I started my business to do this thing that I'm really good at, that I have a lot of interest in. And like, I had no idea that I was also signing up for like this other laundry list of things that like I don't want to do, I'm not good at. I understand the importance of, but like, really, it's just kind of like not what I want to put my attention on. And so that's kind of where we come in. And we're very different than I think a lot of other kind of like modern agencies in that we're not like prescribing anything. We have a lot of really talented people on our team who have a lot of knowledge that they're like eager to apply. And we're not attached to like any one framework or model or process or whatever. And so it gets to be really collaborative. And every time we work with a client, it's different, which I love. And I think, keeps us on our toes and helps us get better all the time too.
Well, and one thing that also I find so interesting about just both how you've like communicated about what you do, but also really approached your work both like for and within the business, and then also like for your clients is this idea of like a full stack approach. And so
Mhm.
for people who are listening who like aren't tech people, how would you define tech full stack approach, and like yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll define it in like the technical terms first, just so everyone kind of knows, like, if you Google this, this is what's going to come up. And then I'll explain how we've sort of adopted that phrase as and turned it into here's what it means for you. So full stack is an approach to building technology. So typically there's the front end and the back end of any sort of technology. So take like your iPhone, for example. The front end is everything you see, right? It's the squares on the screen, it's the way it looks, it's the color blue of the message bubble, it's the fact that you can swipe up and like find a screen that you were missing and like whatever, right? It's like all of the things that the consumer interacts with is what's on the front end. And then what's on the back end is all of the like arguably less sexy stuff that allows it to do that, right? So on the back end of an iPhone, the thing that you never see when you're using it is someone went in there and programmed, if you touch the screen here, this thing happens. So you don't really see that technology working. You can't find that code anywhere as part of the user experience, but it's equally as important because it's making the front end possible. And so there are front end technology developers and there are back end technology developers. And then there are full stack developers, which are people who can do a little bit of everything. And the idea behind a full stack approach is that you can't have one without the other, right? If you've got a back end technology without the front end, it's not consumable because it's not pretty. If you have a front end technology without a back end, it's not powerful. It can't actually like do anything. It might look cute, but your message probably isn't going to send or, whatever it is. And so full stack development is building both the front end and the back end and doing so in a way that really integrates the two for a more holistic experience. And so you're building the front end with the back end in mind and you're building the back end with the front end in mind. And it gets to be this kind of like beautiful intertwined web of strategy that creates a whole that is essentially greater than the sum of its parts. And so that's what it means in a tech sense. How we've kind of taken that philosophy and adopted it is that we help our clients. We're a full stack team, which means there are some people on our team who are really good at the front end stuff, i.e., graphic design and copywriting and website design and everything that your customers and clients will see. And then we've got other people who are really good at the back end. So they're the people who are doing like our ClickUp builds and making sure your Dubsado automations are working and are, building ICA profiles that inform the copy that then ends up on the website. And it comes in a whole bunch of different formats, but we have the capability to do all of it. And the way that we keep everything intertwined and integrated and holistic is because we do a lot of communication internally as a team. And so instead of you as the founder going out and saying, okay, I'm going to hire this copywriter over here and this graphic designer over here and this person over here to do the ClickUp build, when you hire Curate Well Co, you get all of those things. And we all talk to each other on the back end. So you aren't having to play telephone between all these different people. And we really get to know you as a founder and your business in a lot of detail and build that relationship. And we talk to each other all day, every day. And so we're able to accomplish something that is, in my opinion and experience, a little bit more robust.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to do it with, I think, a lot less hassle and frustration and back and forth than
Totally.
other
Well, and
places.
yeah, I mean, I can say like having been on like the receiving end of like getting to work with you in this way, it is so nice to have like the single point of like contacts and then like and to not necessarily like in so many ways as a founder, like you're the node for everything. And to like and that takes up so much brain space and energy and
Hmm.
emotional space. And in many ways, I'm still the node in my business, but to have like a whole set of things that I don't have to be the node for is so
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I think that a lot of people don't realize when they start a business how much like a mental and emotional capacity it takes to just like operate a business, right? Totally different than like the thing that you're good at or the service that you're providing or the offer that you're putting out into the world. It's like like it's all the balls, right? Like you just have all the balls in the air and it's so many things and there's so many decisions. And, I think we've all had that moment of like decision fatigue where you sit down at the end of the day and you're just like, the answer is no.
totally. Or if your like partner's like, what do you want for dinner? And you're like, I don't care, just feed me.
Literally anything.
Anything I don't have to pick.
Yep, yep. Sometimes my partner and I joke, sometimes our answer to that question is sleep. Like, I want sleep for dinner. I'm going to bed. So yeah, it's so much. And to be able to offload some of that brain space to a project manager on our team who kind of acts as that node and connects all the dots, and then know that you have this like roster of people who are each good at something different, who are all kind of working together to make it happen. And who are pinging you really when it's like necessary, and not pinging you when it's not is something that, again, didn't really exist before. But when I was thinking about like, as a consumer, what would I want if there wasn't this like rule about how agencies were built? I was like, this is what I would want. Like, we're always saying I need to replicate myself, or I need a second brain, or whatever. And so we really sat down and we're like, how can we be that? How can we be that second brain? How can we be the replicate of the founders that we're looking to support?
Totally. I love that. Well, and I realized I would love to like zoom out a little bit too of like you mentioned like, quitting your job kind of on a whim to start this business, but would love to hear just more about you and your journey and like how you came to be where you are today. Cause I think it's always so interesting to know like, the twists and turns that like get us to the moment we find ourselves in.
Yeah, sure. So I was never that person that was like, this is what I'm going to do, right? You talk to people where they're like, I'm going to be a doctor. And like
Mhm.
they just know that, right? And they set out and they do that thing. I never really had that. Growing up, in retrospect, I can say that I was very like entrepreneurial. I was like selling bracelets on the side of the road and like, whatever, all the things. I always had like a new business idea, none of which were successful. Now can say that I was always interested in just like creating things. So like kind of taking nothing or like a collection of like little somethings and really turning them into something that like stands for something and means something and does something and produces some result. Um, and I went to school out here in Santa Barbara. And I studied communication, psychology, and professional writing. Again, just because I was like, these seem like practical choices. Like, I don't really know what I'm going to do, but like, these are things that are applicable. And right out of school, I worked for a tech company, and I was recruiting software engineers. And so that's where a lot of my tech knowledge came from. I was totally like not qualified for that job. I had to learn all kinds of, it's like a whole second language. Like I was dropped into a role that didn't exist before. I was an internal recruiter at a company that was trying to hire the like unicorn software developers, full stack software developers. And my interview was that they gave me like 12 job descriptions, and they were like, okay, you have 48 hours to memorize these, and you're going to meet with the CEO of this company, 2 days from now, and you're going to be like quizzed on these job descriptions. And I was like, okay.
Whoa.
um, so I memorized like 12 software engineering job descriptions. And I learned so much in that job. I had the benefit of getting to work with 3 co-founders who are all super different from each other. And so aside from like all of the technical knowledge that I gained that I'm super grateful for, and, learning how to have conversations with people, and also kind of like building out the processes for this like recruiting role that didn't exist before, I also gained so many like soft skills and communication skills that have served me later. Like having to report to 3 people who couldn't agree on anything was such a good experience. It was so frustrating. Like at the time, I was just like, y'all need to like go into this room and like get on the same page and then like come back and get me when you're done. That didn't happen in the time that I was there. And and like I'm glad that I got to like learn from that experience, and I got to learn the different leadership and management and communication styles and personalities that all these people had, and kind of learn how to like flex in and out of that. So from there, I took a job as the head of HR for a startup company. When I started there, it was about 70 people, and they had no HR department. And by the time I left, there were like 170 people. And so I spent my time there, like, more than doubling this team. Their business model, it was actually a food and beverage company. So again, like in retrospect, learned a lot that I got to apply later with Considered. We did corporate catering for tech companies, and their business model was to like copy and paste their operations in a new city every like 3 to 6 months. And
Whoa.
so, yeah, it was really intense. It was like chaos all the time, no matter what. And I was a team of 1 for a lot of my time there. Towards the end, I got a couple of direct reports and I had a little team. But for the majority of my time there, I was a team of 1. And I kind of had to like retroactively build this HR department and then set it up such that like all of these teams in all of these cities could operate without HR because I couldn't be everywhere. So it was like I was HR and then I had all these like branches and there were managers in every city and I had to set them up for success to fire people and like onboard people and train people and get documentation from people and like all of these things. And so really good lesson in like scalability. That was, again, I grew so much in that job. Like I said, it was chaos all the time. And I ended up leaving because it was just like I was just so exhausted. Um and like I learned so much. I quit because it wasn't the best work environment. And I reported to two co-founders and a COO there. So again, three people. They were a little bit more on the same page. But it was just such a reactive, like startup environment, kind of that like quintessential, like stereotypical startup environment. Like I watched Silicon Valley. I watched like 3 episodes and then like had a panic attack and was like, I can't watch this. Like I was like, this is like too familiar. Like it's not entertaining. It's like making me feel bad.
Oh my gosh, I felt like watching separate but I think it's called Industry on HBO.
Oh yeah,
Like I've not worked in that space specifically, but I was like, "Oh my God, watching this show is giving me like the work stress that I
totally.
don't like I don't have this work stress in my life anymore, but it's like triggering me as
Right.
well."
It was so triggering for me. And I had to be like, I can't watch. I can't we need to pick a different show. I can't watch this. So I ended up leaving because we had this like weekly HR meeting and I kept getting stood up, like just ghosted for this meeting. Like there were calendar invites, there was a link, there was like all it was at the same time on the same day every week. And I kept getting just kind of like stood up. And so I brought it up and was like, you have a lot going on as founders and I haven't like there's an agenda, like I have things that I need answers on. And I try to be really respectful of everyone's time by like having an agenda ahead of time and I'm like prepared for these meetings to just like run through everything. But I need you to like show up so I can like get answers for like these things that are impacting these like 170 people that work for you. And they were like, yes, okay, we hear you. And I was like, if you can't make it, that's fine, but at least like RSVP to the invite or like let me know. And so we like had this conversation. I thought we were on the same page. And then the very next meeting, I got ghosted again. Like
Oh,
totally stood up. And so I was like, okay, like there's not a place for me here, right? This clearly like isn't a priority. I'm not a priority. And like fundamentally, there's like a lack of like communication and like basic consideration that I think needs to be in place for me to feel like I have a place on this team. Um,
and I
so I
imagine like
quit.
to keep working as hard as you had been working up and yeah.
Totally, totally. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I quit and I was just like, I can't, this isn't gonna work for me. And I thought about just going to another company and, continuing to grow my career in that way. But I think what that job really taught me was like the ethos of what Curate Well Co is today, right? Which is like it's not working. Right? So like do something different. And I knew that there were people out there who would be really intrigued by that idea. And I knew that I had um the skill set to be able to help them in doing that, like the right people, right, who were interested in that. And so kind of bit by bit through like a lot of iteration and feedback and quick action and just kind of like listening to the people who were willing to buy what I was putting out there, we turned Curate Well Co into what it is. And I did a lot of it by myself for a long time. I think it was a year and a half before I even hired like any sort of help. And then I started with a couple of like part-time hourly contractors and um then I, eventually graduated to like full-time salaried employees. We still have, contractors and whatnot, but people kind of ask like how did this come about? And it's like there's no short answer, right? It's like there's no shortcut, there's no like secret thing that I did. There's no like I just did it. I just like showed up every day and like did the next thing that made sense. And that's like really all I think we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just such a beautiful and accurate, I think, description of entrepreneurship is you just like show up every day and you like do a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, something. Who knows what it's gonna be.
Totally. And like I know we were talking for a minute before this call. It's like I also think like having like the most perfect, detailed, amazing plan is like, something I learn and relearn is like, you kind of just got to like take it as it comes. Like you can have a
Totally.
plan, but like whatever plan you came up with 2 months ago you came up with is probably not the plan that you actually need today.
100%. And I'm also of the belief that, like, you can't deviate from a plan unless you have it. So, like, make the plan,
Mhm.
right? And then, like, stay flexible enough to wake up one day and be like, you know what? This felt right 2 months ago. It doesn't feel quite right today. So, like, how do we need to adjust and what can we do instead?
Absolutely. I love that. Is network on your 2023 to-do list? Hi there, it's Liz. If you're liking our conversation and our approach to personal development, career advancement, and living a life that turns you on, I invite you to join our community, the Girls Club Collective. We are the intentionally intimate personal and professional development community for women who are changing the world. Instead of asking for a seat at the table, we decided to build our own. Like most change agents and rebels with a cause, you don't often have enough hours in the day to change the world and cultivate a strategic network. If overwhelm has become your second language and you're feeling tired of trying to convince your own marketing team to actually read your ESG report, you're in the right place. We know that sometimes trying to make a difference can feel like being that one person out on the dance floor trying to get the party started. And that's why we created the Girls Club Collective. It's where women changing the world organize, and all you have to do is show up as yourself. We are the anti establishment version of the Boys Club, reimagining ambition and leading the movement of meaningful work fueled by moxie, strategy, and a little bit of magic. That means you not only gain access to a community of people you need to know, you'll also take a look at how you can grow as a leader, what you really want, and why your dream of living by the beach and working for yourself isn't as crazy as it sometimes feels. By offering monthly peer advisory, salons on timely and relevant topics, networking power hours, and more, the Girls Club Collective is your extended team, your extra brains, and an energizing environment that is geared toward your personal and professional growth. We believe that changing the world is a team sport. Join the collective designed for exactly that and use the code PODCAST, that's all caps podcast, for 10% off your first year of membership. You can find the link to join us in the show notes. And I cannot wait to see you in the collective. Well, and I would love to hear a little bit more about like what inspired you to acquire the van slash bus, like, and to take this like full stack approach and like ethos, and apply it to like a physical space and to coffee.
Yeah, it was not totally premeditated. It was a little bit of an accident. So, we were hoping to expand into a brick and mortar space. We have an office here in Santa Barbara. We wanted a bigger space that could be our team offices, could also be a co working space, and would have a little cafe in it. And then have like a photo studio component, be able to rent it out for events, kind of this like multi-purpose entrepreneurial hub for people. And so put together a whole business plan, secured funding, went to go look at spaces. We even put in a couple of offers on spaces. And it just kind of like wasn't happening despite our like very best efforts. We had funding in place. We had a really solid business plan. We had a really lovely, beautiful pitch deck. We were doing all the right things and it just kind of wasn't clicking. And I think that's just because the real estate market in Santa Barbara is awful.
Mhm.
It's totally nuts. And so we, after months like kind of putting this concept together and doing a lot of the groundwork and getting really clear on like what it was going to like look and feel like, we spent about 3 months looking at spaces. And we were seeing 1 to 5 spaces a week. Like we were on it and we were like monitoring all the sites. And as soon as a new listing came up, we were like there. We like really put like our full effort into it. And after about 3 months, I was like, okay, it's not working. Right? Like we can't just keep doing this. And we'd kind of also exhausted all of the available spaces. And we were like, do we just, keep looking and just like exponentially like drag this out until we like maybe find something? Or do we pivot and like do something that seems to make a little bit more sense right now? And so part of our initial vision was to have some sort of like outside ancillary component like in front of our space. And so I was like, well, what if we just do that for now? Start small. We don't need as much money. We don't need to like deal with these landlords that are like kind of not taking us seriously. We don't need to like go, it's going to be easier, right? And cheaper basically to get started. And then we can get out in the community, start like growing, our base of people, build brand awareness, and then revisit the brick and mortar space after we've, done that and we like have revenue and all of these things. So we were like, okay, we'll look into that. We didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. And then I was window shopping on Craigslist, which is something that my husband taught me about. Um,
Oh my goodness. I'm like, I feel like I cannot do not window shop. Like everything in me is like, don't window shop on Craigslist. Go and look, knowing exactly what you want to find.
like once a week, he just goes on Craigslist and is like, let's see what's going on, like what's out there this week. So I learned that from him, and I was doing that, and I saw this bus, and I grew up with an old VW. We had a Bug convertible. So I had like, fun memories and like sentimental component to that. And I always thought the buses were super cool. And this guy had this listing for this bus, and it was really sentimental to him too. And he was like, I'm really sad to get rid of it, but here's my reality, blah, 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 whatever. And so it spoke to me, and I went to go see it. And then I was talking with him, and we kind of clicked right away, and it was super cute. And he was like, oh yeah, my full-time job is that I convert Sprinter vans for like van life people. And I work at a shop here in town. And I was like, fantastic. Here's what I want to do with this bus. Will you do it for me? I was like, if I buy your bus, will you turn it into a coffee shop for me? And he said yes. And I think he regrets that. And, um, and he got right to work on it. And, so we've built a really lovely relationship with him. He was super stoked to like have it, have another life and keep it in town. And he did the whole interior build. And then I did a decent amount of the work as well. I painted it. I painted the outside, which I also had no desire or like anticipation of doing, but it just kind of happened. And then our team put together all the different pieces. And then before we knew it, we were like, we have a coffee bus. um, and it's super cute and people love it. And it's also kind of like an engineering feat. Like it's really impressive. Like every time I like think about it for a sec, I'm like, wow, we fit a whole coffee shop into this like 80 square foot area that moves kind of. Um, so
Slowly-ish.
it's yeah, slowly-ish. We actually went on the highway earlier this week for the first time, and we got up to 50. So there we go.
Wow.
No, yeah, we were cruising. But yeah, so it wasn't really intentional. It was kind of just again responding thoughtfully at every turn and just being committed to like what it stands for and being open to the different formats that it could take.
So fun. So fun. I think it's just so cool to see how you've applied this to a physical space of like disco ball, like bus, coffee. It's so cute. I can't wait to come have coffee there in person. Of course, it's
I'm
like
excited for you to see it.
I can't wait. It's like never a hard sell for me to come to Santa Barbara anyway, but
And now it's even better. Yeah, it's super fun. We got to like treat it like a Curate client and just kind of like build it from the ground up. And that was amazing.
what's been like the biggest like surprise learning you've had in the journey of launching Considered?
So many things. I've done so many things I thought I would never do, like change the oil on a generator on the sidewalk on a Thursday. So like lots of like those types of things. And I think the thing that strikes me, this isn't like a super positive note, but I think it's really interesting. Some people are just like really, really rude. Like being in the service industry has really opened my eyes, I think, to like what's wrong with our like consumer culture. Like it's just so much more apparent when you're dealing with like physical goods than like a service, right? Like when you sell a service, people are paying a lot for, something that's a little bit less tangible, but that they are like very much opting into, that they don't really like take for granted. I think there's a lot of people that take their coffee, their morning coffee order, or their whatever for granted, right? Like you just assume it's gonna like, I don't know, appear for you. And so it's been really, really interesting to see how the community has responded to us, especially in Santa Barbara, which is a relatively small town and in a lot of ways a fairly like stuck in its ways town, and a very like uniform town, like visually and experientially. Um, and we kind of came in and just like fuck that all up. So that's been it's been really interesting. And we have a lot of support from a lot of people. We get so many people that walk by and they're like, wow, this is like stupid cool. And then they buy coffee and they're like super stoked about it and it's great. And then we also have people that are like, I'm gonna call the cops every time you're parked here. And it's just been so interesting to to like absorb that firsthand in a way that I think is so much more palpable than like someone's Instagram comment, right? Like it's so different when it's like to your face and someone is like, I don't want you here. I am going to call the cops every time you're here. And you're just like, okay, have a good day.
Yeah, it's like it's so interesting. It's like this is like, it's one thing to talk about like doing things differently and to like get to do things differently from behind our computers or like in spaces that we curate. And like, I think to some extent, like it, it gives us like we have like the privilege of like creating like, the world that we want to be in. But like when you're going out into the world that is and trying
Yeah.
to do things differently, like you are feeling in real time what the response to that is from people.
100%. That's such a good way to put it. And that is such a huge difference between the two businesses. Is like one exists in this world that we created and the other one exists in this world that we inserted ourselves into and are like trying to change for the better. And yeah, there's certain days where it's really hard. Um and every time that we get that reinforcement around like something that we like deeply believe in, and someone's like, wow, I've never experienced this before, this was amazing, I'm like, right, and that's why we're doing it. And like
And these are
eventually
our people.
these are our people, and also like eventually we'll reach that tipping point where enough people hear about that where they're like, okay, like I have to, I get it, right? Like it becomes mainstream at some point. You just have to get to that point.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So interesting. Well, something else I did want to talk about, if you're up for talking about it, I really appreciated how you've been really open, on social media, and your content, and just how you show up about what it was like to get diagnosed with OCD at age
Yeah.
28. And I feel like it feels inspiring to me that we're living in a moment where people are having real conversations about mental health in a way that they weren't necessarily like when we were growing up. But what was that like to get that diagnosis in your late 20s?
Yeah, it was unexpected. And after I had a chance to like sit with it and accept it, it was incredibly validating and so comforting and just clicked, right? It was like I then got to like, look back at the last however many years and be like, oh, right. Okay, this all makes sense now, right? Like I get it. There were like all of these signs that, I missed, other people missed, my family missed, whatever. And now I can be like, oh, yes, I have a reason now, right? Like this, like, lingering feeling of like, why do I feel this way? Why don't other people feel this way? And this like sense of like disconnect that I felt like operating in the world like made sense. And that was just so comforting. And it also opened up the avenue for like getting treatment, which has improved the quality of my life like more than I feel like I could express in words. Um, So I wish that it had happened earlier for the sake of like my childhood and like adolescent years and like young adult years. And I think that it happened at a time where I had already kind of come to terms with myself in a lot of ways because I didn't know that there was like some underlying something else going on. And so it kind of just got to be this like extra little thing where I was like, oh, okay, this is like now a part of me too. And because I had this like strong foundation of like who I am as a person outside of that, I think I'm in a better place to be able to like speak up about it more openly and more confidently than I would have been had I been diagnosed with it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever, when it wasn't as openly accepted, right? And there was a lot more stigma about it. And I hadn't necessarily gone through all the life experiences that equipped me to be able to like talk about hard things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I so appreciate your sharing that. And I'm curious, like, what has it been like to speak up about it? Like, what has that journey looked like for you?
It's been pretty uneventful.
Mm.
Like I kind of was just like, I feel the need to talk about this because no one's talking about it. So while we've come such a long way in terms of our mental health, right? Like it is so much less stigmatized and it is so much more accepted to talk about depression, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, all of these things, which is fantastic and like so necessary and so good. There's definitely other layers to mental health that like aren't being talked about yet. And OCD is one of those things that is still pretty like misrepresented in the media. So I didn't know a lot about it when I got diagnosed. And it took someone who's qualified like explaining it to me and also me doing a lot of like research on my own to be like, oh yeah, this is like totally 100% what I have. But it never had been like represented to me or like role modeled to me in any way that was the same as I experience it and how the majority of people experience it, right? So you see OCD represented in the media as like flipping a light switch a certain number of times or like um wearing the exact same clothes every single day, which I like kind of sort of do a little bit, but not quite as extremely as it's shown in the media. And I was like, well, I don't do that, right? I don't feel the need to like turn the doorknob or flip the light switch or wash my hands 18 times a day or whatever. And that is, those types of OCD definitely exist. And it displays in so many other ways. And so I was like, I think people need to know about this. And I think it's one of those experiences that is so profoundly lonely and consuming and like draining, like
Mm.
energetically draining that I don't think people really I think people write it off, right?
Mhm.
It's like, "Oh, you just have this thing that you, like, do, right? You have to do this thing." And I don't think people realize the, like, tug of war that happens internally with yourself when you're like, "I don't know why I can't let this go, but I can't, and I feel like it's my fault."
Mm.
And that is so hard to not be able to point to anything outside of yourself of just like, "Yeah, it's me, right? I'm doing this." Um and I think that people don't realize how much of like a toll that takes over time.
Definitely. Well, and yeah, I mean, there you just shared so much in that. And I was actually going to ask you like what you wish more people knew. Um, and I feel like that it sounds like that's the piece. It's just that like one, how lonely that experience can be,
Yeah.
and two, that it looks different than like
Mhm.
the light switch, like
Yeah, totally.
metaphor or like thing that we've seen on TV that is like just like sort of our very like quick association that's like doesn't go deeper than that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. The like analogy that I've shared with people before that I think is a really powerful visual is that OCD feels like walking into a room and painting yourself into a corner and then like sitting there and waiting for it to dry. And then it dries and you walk out and then the next morning you wake up and do the same thing.
Mm.
Like it's this feeling of being trapped by like yourself basically. Like, and it's and every day, right? And it's also a huge, like I said, energetic burden because um someone like me who's like a pretty high functioning person, I like do all the normal life things and like probably like above average amount of like normal life things. And then you have all the OCD things. And so what that looks like is so one of my things is that I really like uniformity and like aesthetics. And so everything I own is like white, black, neutral colors, soft tones, whatever. And so I'll spend an extra however many minutes looking for the thing on Amazon that's like the color that I want it to be. So like doesn't matter what it is, right? Like fan for your room or like spray bottle for the surface cleaner that you're going to use, like whatever, right? It's like you search for it and then you go to like page 12 to like find the one that looks nice. um and so it's a time consuming, right? That's part of the OCD diagnosis is that it takes X amount of time out of your day. Um, and it's just so much brain power, kind of like we were talking about before, right? It's like you're the node for like all of these things, in addition to all the things that all the other people in the world like do too. And so at the end of the day, it's just like you're just exhausted. And so I think those are things that people like don't realize is that it's yeah, it takes so much from you.
Mm, I can only imagine. And I mean, like, on the one hand, like, you create beautiful, like, experiences and aesthetics and, like, like, it I just am so impressed by your eye for all the things, and that comes at a high cost.
Totally. And it's, there's some things that I really embraced, right? Like I was just like, yeah, this makes me happy and it makes me calm and it is beautiful and I love that. So like that's okay with me, right? Like I very much have come to terms with the fact that like I have to search harder for like the same thing, but it's worth it to me. And then there's other things that really like weren't adding any benefit to my life that I've only been able to release because I'm now like on medication and like receiving treatment. And it's like, night and day, right? It's like the things that like I couldn't let go of before. Like specifically like intrusive thoughts. I'm now able to be like, yep, okay, that's not for me. And that wasn't even possible for me before. It would just like linger.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So helpful and illuminating. And just really appreciate your vulnerability and talking about it too.
Yeah.
I'm curious, sort of in a similar vein, but different question. One of the things I love talking about on the podcast is things we wish we could tell our younger selves, or things like we wish we knew when we were younger. And you can totally pick an age, or if you just have generic younger self advice, I'm here for that too. But what do you wish you could tell younger Pia?
Mm. I wish that she'd had more fun.
Mm.
I have always been like an old soul, and so I've always been like a very like serious person. Like as a kid, I was serious, right? Like I took things seriously. And that's just part of my personality, right? And I don't think that it could have changed, but I do really wish that there was the narrative in my life of like yeah, this doesn't matter. You should just like go have fun. Um, so I think that, if and when I do have kids, I really want that to be like a part of their experience. Like, of course, like structure and rules have a place. Um, and I definitely want to like make sure that there is like fun and joy and like existence for the sake of existence in the lives of my children if I choose to have them.
Mm. Definitely. I feel like that for me, I think specifically back to like me immediately like post college or like early 20s. And like I was so worried about like ever figuring out any sort of like
Totally.
career. And I like wish I could just go back and be like, girl, it's going to be okay. Like
Totally.
enjoy being 22, enjoy being
Yeah,
23.
totally. Yeah, I think about like high school and college and, I took things so seriously, which is, it was part of my journey, but I wish I could go back and be like, yeah, you live in Isla Vista for like 4 years. Like just have fun.
Go to the beach.
Yeah. It's okay to skip class. You can go to the beach today.
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, and my other favorite podcast question to ask is I'm a big fan of the inspirational post-it note. I'm surrounded by them
Mm,
currently. One day I will get them all printed in like a beautiful pre-populated post-it deck of like reminders or sayings.
I love that.
Well, what would you want to put on your post-it, or like what are you currently looking at or reminding yourself of?
I love that. So I don't have post-it notes because OCD. If I do have post-it notes, they have to be white, and then I can't. I live a paperless life. But my metaphorical post-it note says, these days, I think it says like just show up.
Hmm.
Show up and try to like make a positive impact on someone's day.
Mm. So simple.
So simple.
And like obviously there's so much in that.
Yeah.
Well, also because this is the Women Changing the World podcast, my required question for everyone I have on the show is if you could change one thing about the world, what's the one thing that you would most like to change?
Ooh, what a good question. Oh, okay. I have a layered answer. So, my answer is that I really just wish that there were more exceptional things,
Mm,
exceptional products, experiences, everything. Like, I just wish that there were more really excellent things. And I think that if we can do that, that then translates into solving some of our biggest problems. Like if things are really exceptional and excellent, I think that that creates the bandwidth to direct that impact towards like the things that matter, whether that's addressing the systemic issues in our country, and or like changing the culture that we live in to be more accepting and welcoming and understanding, um, to mental health, right? Like having people enjoy the experiences that they have is um, something that I think we could all use more of these days.
mm. I love that so much, and I feel like I'd be remiss not to name something I learned from a Tony Robbins event, actually. And I know he's controversial. It's a different conversation for a different time. But in talking about the gap between like good and excellent, um,
Ooh,
this idea that like to get from like average to good is like can be so much work, and to
yeah,
get from like below average to average can be so much work that often when we're operating in the realm of like good, we have this idea that it's going to be that same amount of work to get from good to excellent, but it's not. It's
yeah, it's totally not.
yeah, it's often it's like 10% of the work that it took to get from like average to great.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I love that like vision for the future,
yeah.
and also imagine it's like not as far off as it might feel sometimes.
Totally. And in my experience, going from good to excellent really just takes being willing to do that like 1% of things that most people are not willing to do,
Mhm.
right? It takes being willing to be like very slightly inconvenienced or spend like a little bit more money or like show up at that place even if it's raining or like whatever, right? Like it's just that like 1% of things that most people would be like, it's not worth it. If you're willing to be like, it is worth it, then I think that's how we get there.
I love it. Well, I'm curious for people who want to like find you, follow you, keep up with you, go drink coffee at the bus. Like, where are the best places for people to keep in touch with you? And we'll be sure to include the links to these in the show notes too.
Yeah, so we're on Instagram. So our Curate Well Co account is at Curate Well Co, all one word. And then our considered Instagram account is consideredsb.co. And currently we're just in Santa Barbara. Our old bus is slow. She can't do long ranges. So that is a Santa Barbara only experience, but you can follow us online and experience it from afar. And if you're ever passing through town, definitely stop by and see us.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Pia. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I'm so inspired by what you're building. I'm so inspired by our work together and so grateful for you. I
Mm.
just really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, the feeling is mutual. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the Women Changing the World podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is liz.best, that's lis.best, or you can find me on LinkedIn by searching my name, Liz Best. Join my mail list by visiting elizabethbest.com/monthly meditation, and you'll receive all the latest updates on events, retreats, and opportunities to work with me, plus a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch, and I'll see you in the next episode.